Hi guys, would you believe it? Fife pensioner homeowners are now worth 8.03. Amazing statistic when you think about it. Fife pensioner homeowners are now worth £8.03 billion in real estate. That's an remarkable figure. So we're going to have a quick discussion. We thought we'd have an impromptu show for the Fife Property Show instead of a Saturday morning. So we've got Richard Cook on today and we've got Jimmy Mullen to talk about this.
Morning, guys.
Morning, how you doing?
Absolutely. Perfect. Let's crack on with this. I mean, how wealth is distributed will always be a contentious issue, especially as the baby boomers. Well, the baby boomers really is defined as those that are aged between their late 50s and their late 70s. Wealth has grown exponentially over the last 20 years compared to the wealth of the younger generation. And we know property prices has tripled over the last 20 years, with most UK property in the hands of the older generation, with its total value about to smash through the 8 trillion barrier. Trillion. I can't even comprehend that figure. Up from 3 trillion at the start of the millennium. So 20 years ago it was 3 trillion. Now it's 8 trillion right across the UK. Is it right? So it's so much wealth. Is it right? Really, it's so much wealth is concentrated in the hands of the older generations. You know, that's really what it comes down to. National house prices have continued to grow unabated. For example, in the last 8 years, about 50%, whilst real take-home pay has only increased round about the 12% level. Yeah. So this has meant the younger people are finding it even harder to get onto the property ladder, and those already on it to move up the property ladder. So, you know, guys, what's your thoughts about this? This is unbelievable, the statistic.
Yeah, that's a good start, and then and you do see it quite a lot. There's a lot of capital, obviously money held up in retirees and properties, and a lot of people who are now looking to obviously upgrade or even first-time buyers they're looking at these properties that are held up by obviously the older generation, and sometimes you're waiting on them either downsizing or even reaching the end of their life to then find a property, and you see quite a lot.
But you've said it. I mean, reaching the end of the life, the reality is we're all living longer. So we're needing more houses. You know, that's really what it comes down to as well. I mean, when we live 2 years longer than what was expected, therefore, they're going to have to build 2 years worth of more houses. And it's not just right on our doorstep. It's right across the UK. I mean, that's tens of thousands of houses. If not hundreds of thousands of houses. Because when you think about it, they're saying they've got to build 270,000 houses a year. That means we've got to find another 500,000 houses just because people are living a lot longer. Clearly, we want people to live a lot longer.
Yeah.
We don't want
everybody to have a home.
but the stark reality, isn't it, is the fact that we've got to build more houses.
Yeah, and I think particularly more bungalows, because the older generation, I think the reason that they hold on to these houses longer and why it's worth so much more is because there is no bungalows available. So what a typical people want to downsize to? They want to downsize to all on one level so they can continue to look after themselves, etc. But there's none getting built, so they just end up, they don't want to take the risk because they're old, they're fragile, don't want to take the risk of putting it on the market and don't feel like they'll be in control. So they just stay where they are and stay put at the end of the day.
Yeah, well, let's look at that then. Let's look at some of the statistics here and let's have a wee discussion about this. So looking at the older end of the age range for the home ownership, of about 160 or 161,000 houses in Fife, 43,000 of these households are 65 years and older. So 70% of the households, well, about 30,000 are owned mostly without, 70% of that is mostly owned without a mortgage. So with the full split is really, that's the split there. You know, 70% owned, you know, council house, 24%, private rented, 2.5, and living rent free, 2.9. So that's the plus 65 onwards. That's the split of their tenure in terms of where they are. And it's quite a big statistic. I mean, I talk with many Fife house pensioners. I mean, you guys know that all the time. I mean, I go out all the time to see people of an older generation, probably because that's where I am almost. And this appears to be a shortage of suitable properties in Fife for the members of the older generation to downsize into. I mean, you've hit the nail on the head a bit there, Jimmy. You know, it's downsizing. It's the most important thing. I mean, there's due to the high demand and the low supply, Fife bungalows and suitable ground floor apartments achieve on an average a 15 to 25% premium per square foot for 2 to 3 story properties. Yet, would it surprise you that only 1%, here's a statistic here, only 1% of new builds in the UK are single story bungalows compared to 7% 25 years ago? So what the hell is going on with our housing policy?
Yeah, we touched on this in the show the other week. It was about, we looked at the area of St Andrews and the shortage of bungalows there, and obviously they have got quite a big older generation, and they want to stay within St Andrews, but can't downsize because they can't find a suitable property. So they're in these big houses, either on their own or just a couple, which could be family homes, but because they've not got anywhere to downsize to in the area that they want, obviously St Andrews, then they're holding up all these family properties. That was one of the topics.
But then this is right across the board, Richard.
Yeah,
I mean, this is only 1% of houses are now on lower level or bungalows are getting built, and yet compared to 7%, which is 25 years ago, that's a seventh of the original amount that were getting built. And yet our population is growing older and older by the day because they're living longer and longer. So there should be a coherent strategy somewhere by the Scottish government and by the UK government to force people to build bungalows, whether they like it or not. But is that a strategy out there? Are they actually doing that? That's what it comes down to.
Yeah, I think it's not just to build more homes, it's to build the right homes that are suitable to accommodate, like, obviously, the different age groups and things, to allow them to move on and free up the properties that are obviously there in at the moment for the next generation and things as well. So yeah, it's not just about more homes, it's the right homes as well.
Yeah, I mean, YouGov, did a survey a couple of years ago, and they found that just over 1/3 of homeowner pensioners in the UK were looking to downsize into a smaller property. I mean, that's 33% when you think about it, are looking to downsize. But we're not building enough bungalows now. We're building a seventh of what we used to build 25 years ago. And they're living older, so we're needing 500,000 more properties for these 2 years that they live extra. So we need to rethink about how we can encourage older homeowners to sell their homes and release them to younger families in desperate need. This is the vicious circle.
Yeah.
This is the classic. It's like the younger families want to upgrade to the bigger homes, but the people in the bigger homes, which don't need them anymore, can't downgrade because they don't have the smaller properties to downgrade to, because guess what? The government's no forcing anybody to build them, and the house builders are just going, well, there's more profit in a double-story house than there is in a bungalow, because they've got less a footprint to cover with more building.
It'd be interesting to see if the government's even considered or discussed that and looked at that for that aspect. That would be an interesting thing to investigate.
The thing is, if they built bungalows, they could put them. I think there would be. I think builders, obviously, they just look at the number of rooms and what they could sell them for. I think if they actually spoke to somebody and realised and really figured out what a premium a bungalow could go for, then I think they would actually be quite surprised about it. It's just obviously putting the plans.
Bungalows are quite sought after, and they do come at a premium.
There's a rule of thumb, though: for every 2 houses a house builder builds, the next one's free. It's profit. Yeah. And that's the rule of thumb. So that's why they look to build houses, because houses will get them more value for money per square foot, because you've got more square footage on 2 levels than you have on 1 level, because you're taking a bigger footprint up with a bungalow. Therefore, you could build more houses on that footprint, if that makes sense. So it is a lot more profit for a house builder not to build a bungalow. It's a lot more profit for selling, for us, to sell. But for the initial house builder, I don't think it's profitable at all. That's why they're not doing it. Hence the reason why I scratched my head when Lockheed Homes said we're going to build 92 bungalows outside St Mullins. Really? I'm not getting that, because that's quite controversial, considering the rule of thumb is you make more money on houses than you do on a bungalow.
But they obviously know. I mean, Mum's allowed. Well, there's a newer development where they have built some bungalows. in sort of the East Nuke, but I don't think there's probably ever been a development like this in the East Nuke where it's just specifically bungalows. And
Yeah.
I think they've explored that market and they exposed on it, and I think they will reap the rewards of it when it does come. Well, when they do release the whole marketing.
Yeah. The government over the last 11 years appeared to target all their attention on first-time buyers. We can see that anyway. We can see that as well with today. The budget, they're going to announce that the banks are going to be able to do 95% mortgages. So we can see that clearly, that's coming. And also the stamp duty threshold. You know, stamp duty is going to be extended probably more than likely for England because it's the UK Chancellor that does it. But then it's up to our Scottish government to then probably follow suit or come up with something similar. So we'll have to wait to see what happens with their strategy. It comes after that. And also they've had a strategy such as the Help to Buy scheme. I mean, the Scottish government as well has had the strategy of obviously the First Homes Fund, which is 25,000 up to your first purchase for a first-time buyer in Scotland. You know, and they'll give you money towards that. If anybody needs more information on the First Home Fund, please go to our YouTube channel. We've got all these information and blogs and vlogs on there, which are helpful guides. And you just type in First Home Fund, and you will get that vlog. And it is an in-depth discussion about what the First Home Fund is with Neil Bird from Cara Mortgages and what it will mean for you as a first-time buyer. Because at the end of the day, as far as I'm concerned, it's free money. It's 20. No requirement to pay it back until you sell. No requirement to actually pay any interest on it at all while you've got the loan from the government. Wow. Wish I had that. My first flat was 20 grand. I would have bought it outright. And I would have got cash back.
If anyone wants to speak to me about that as well, I purchased my first home using that very scheme. So I'm more than happy to speak to anybody.
And
well.
how did that work for you then, Jimmy? Did you feel that that's fine and that's okay and it worked out?
I mean, for the house that we wanted, that was the only way we could get it.
Yeah.
And I mean, at the end of the day, it's free money. You're still paying off your mortgage, obviously the appreciation on it, the improvements that I'm going to make on the property that did need a little bit of work. Then I just pay that back when I do sell it. Ultimately, you're still paying your mortgage, still reaping the rewards as you do a normal house. You just won't have that small bit when you do sell it on. So. Be honest, it's an absolute no-brainer.
I've got to say though, Jimmy, that's a cracking house that you've got behind you. Is that your house then?
I bought that.
I wish. However, really, this doesn't address the long-established undersupply of appropriate retirement housing, vital to the needs of the Fife ageing population. Unfortunately, Fife housing stock is sadly ill-equipped for this demographic shift to ageing homeowners. I mean, really, that's what it comes down to. Also, to add insult to this injury, those more mature Fife pensioners in their 80s and 90s who do live in the restricted number of Fife bungalows and suitable ground floor apartments are finding it difficult to live on their own, as they're unable to leave their bungalow apartment because of the shortage of sheltered housing and inexpensive care home places. I mean, that's another thing that we're lacking of as well, is the amount of sheltered housing, care home complex. They're needing to get a grip on the policy for housing. They're needing to get this sorted out because it isn't going to go away. It isn't Logan's Run where we're going to terminate everybody at 30-year-old. You know, that's it. You remember that? You know, that's not going to happen, folks.
I think that, I mean, like you say, as people live older and obviously, as the years go on, obviously people are living older, and I think the government needs to consider obviously the care and accommodation for this, these additional years that people are living, because it's putting out the younger generation.
Absolutely. I mean, and this in turn means that the younger 60 to 70-year-old, I mean, I'm saying younger, year-old Fife retirees in their bigger 2- and 3-story family houses can't buy those Fife bungalows occupied by the older retirees, which means that the Fife families in their 30s and 40s can't buy the larger families' homes occupied by the younger 60 to 70-year-olds. Are you keeping up with me here? They're needing to grow in the further growing families. It's like everybody's waiting for everyone else because of the logjam at the top of the property ladder. So we need to solve the problem at the top of the property ladder with the people, the elderly population, in order to sort out the housing problem. This is like this proverbial motorway carry on, where you join a queue and you're in there and you're sitting in a queue for the next 2 hours waiting. What the hell's going on? What the hell's going on? And you get to the front of the queue and go, what was that all about? Yeah. So what's the simple solution? I mean, quite simple. It is really build more houses, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think that is probably going to be the only way to get it resolved. I mean, I was out to a client on Monday, lovely stone built property over two stories, big high ceilings. Said they're struggling to heat it. They wanted to stay where they were because it was walking distance to everything, and one of them didn't drive, but wanted to downsize and go to all in one level with 2 bedrooms. I said, well, but they didn't want to put the house on the market and go homeless. I said, well, you think about it, how many people are wanting the same thing as you are? I said, ultimately, that is going to be a premium. The time you put your property on the market, you ain't ever going to get it. So
yeah, my advice to an elderly person who's actually in that situation, has a bigger house, but they don't have something to downsize because there's not adequate accommodation on the market to suit their purposes, and live in their own area that they've been for the last 30, 40 years, is go to your local council and tell them that is the case. Unless you keep feeding that back to them, they will not. Now, I told somebody to do that. Now, I don't want a council house. I went, I'm not asking you to get a council house. I'm asking you to register with them in order so they understand and they have these numbers available to the fact that people in an elderly position are looking to downsize and there's not suitable accommodation on offer in their area. And there needs to be. And the only way you're going to get that back is actually to keep constantly registering with the council. And once they'll get, the penny will drop with them eventually. Yeah. Because the reality is, if you've got 100,000 people walk in the next day and say, I'm going to register with you because I'm wanting a smaller property in my area, they're going to go, well, they're going to need to do something about this. So when a planning application goes in to build houses on a development, they turn around and say, well, a certain amount of them has to be bungalows.
Yeah.
Yeah, because unless they see this continual stream of people notifying them that they are in need of obviously this kind of accommodation, they're not going to take heed and look to instruct these kind of properties to be commissioned. So,
yeah. I mean, in the last 30 years, here's a classic. In the last 30 years, the UK population has grown by around 12 million people. Yet the number of properties available has only grown by around 4.2 million homes. 12 million people, 4.2 million homes.
Yeah.
That means 3 of these people have to live in every single home. And that is probably not a possibility when you think about it. So the reality is we're going to have to sort out this housing problem. And it's been a thorn in successive government side over the years. I mean, because they've never ever reached their target or they're meant to be reaching. So how are we going to reach that? How are we going to get that? I mean, with obstructive planning regulations, immigration, people living longer, increased divorce rates, meaning one family becomes 2 households. We have needed 275,000 properties to be built every year. Hence the reason why I said to you, 350,000, 550,000 is going to be needed if our population lives 2 years longer. You're going to have all of a sudden 550,000 houses out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Just because of that. And since the millennium, it just to stand still to meet demand. So 20 years ago, the UK was building on average 185,000 households a year. This figure has dropped in the 5 years after the global financial crisis in 2008 to 140,000 houses per year. And thankfully, it's increased steadily over the last 5 years. And the last year, they've created 245,000 households in the UK. However, they've still not, since the millennium, made up for all the differences we've had in that between. So what did we do?
There's been a lot of changes, obviously, since the millennium, and really they need to keep up with these changes, or we're continually going to be playing catch up, which is what we're doing right now, and just never meeting the demands of the population. So
the answer is probably to build more starter homes, bungalows, sheltered accommodation, because land prices are holding back the property market, and as the larger national building firms are more inclined to focus on traditional 2- and 3-story apartments rather than bungalows, as we just said, they make more money from them. You might say that there's no land to build property on yet. Only 1.2% of the UK is built on with residential properties. So 1.2% of the land in the UK is built on with residential properties.
That's crazy. I never knew that, actually. That's quite crazy.
That's mental, eh? It's like, my God, What is the problem here? There's a field, there's a house builder. Why do you not just build the houses? I mean, I know there's a bigger picture that you've got to think about the pressure on the school, the pressure on the doctors, the pressure on the hospitals, the pressure on the gas services, the electrical services, the utilities, the sewage, the everything like that, and the water and everything like that. But surely somewhere has got a coherent strategy to enable this to happen and to make it happen. And for God's sake, stop watching it happen. So how could Fife people make more money on the news eventually as well? You know, the reality is we're in a time where there's limited supply, there's huge amount of demand. So how could Fife people make more money on this news? I mean, should Fife property investors who are considering purchasing bungalows, especially ones that need pivoting, sometimes, you know, from somebody it's a DCC3, the bungalows purchased at the right price in the great location is a great gamble for flipping. You know, that's the reality.
I'd say to everybody that I go to who owns a single-story bungalow cottage on the one level, this is a premium and perfectly the market we need to target, or do our best to target, or we know we can target, should I say, the people that are downsizing, because ultimately they'll get their own come on and they will be the ones that pay the premium.
Yeah, ultimately that's what it is. We need to build more properties. We need to get more properties, but there is opportunities out there for people that can actually have a bungalow, they can do it up to the best ability, and they could sell it on. Because the reality, I always say, is you've got an aging population who've sold a big, massive house, and it's obviously worth a hell of a lot more money than the bungalow is. So they're quite happy and quite prepared to pay a premium on the bungalow in order to get it for their needs. At the end of the day, I always say to them, you can't take it with you. You may as well enjoy it now while you've got it and do what you want to do with it. And if it's 20 years you last in your bungalow and it costs you another £20,000 to buy it, you're paying £1,000 a year to have exactly what you want. Who wouldn't do that? That's the reality. And that's it, guys. That's my summations on this. I mean, what were your thoughts, final thoughts on it?
I think that, like you say, it does open a lot of opportunity as well. Like you say, for developers, investors and things, deceased estates can be flipped and turned around, and that is one aspect that's good from it. But I think the most important thing is, like you say, if you're somebody of a certain age group that's in this position where you're unable to downsize to the property you want, you need to be making the local authorities aware of this situation. And if everybody continues to do that, then they will take notice and maybe implement builds that are going to start facilitating.
Yeah, Jimmy, final thoughts on this?
Yeah, I would say, I think what Richard touched on there as a key point is registering with your local council, etc., to make sure that you're registered and they know the situation. But also, if you are looking to downsize, speak to experts, estate agents in the area, get the most advice so they can maybe tell you how likely a property like that is to come up in the area that you look in. They can look at the stats numbers for that, and then you can realise how much of a premium they are and the likelihood of you getting that, and whether you want to take the leap of faith or just stay where you are, because ultimately you have two choices, so that's stay or move. You need to decide which one you're doing.
Yeah, and if you're struggling to find the right property to downsize to, if you've been in contact with an agent and things, and people that have got their finger on the pulse, they'll make you aware of things that are coming up, maybe even before they hit the market, and that'll allow you to maybe get in there and make a move without having the challenges of competing with other people to try and get the property that you want.
Yeah, it's a daunting prospect for an aging population. That's really what it comes down to. I mean, the fear factor of the fact that you've been comfortable in your home for all your life, for about 20 or 30 years possibly, and then all of a sudden you've got all that upheaval, you don't know where to start, you don't know what about removal, how do I sell my property, you know, who do I go to, what solicitor do I do I need to clean it up beforehand, do I need to get it decorated and all the rest of it. And ultimately an agent, it's worth their salt, an estate agent's worth their salt and worth actually speaking to, knows exactly the answer to every single one of these questions. Yeah. And that's really what it comes down to. It's not about selling your house. It's about taking you and guiding you through the whole process from start to finish to enable to make it be a stress-free, smooth transition to your next property. Yeah. That's what it's all about. Helping you manage life as it happens. Yeah. And that's it, guys. Thanks very much for your time. And if anybody's got any further questions on this, please feel free to message us direct or call any of our offices. And bye for now. And we'll see you on Saturday morning for the live Fife Property Show at 9:30. Bye-bye for now.
See you later.
Cheers, guys.